clarity over cleverness. You want to flex your skills, your verbal skills. There's places to do that. It's usually not in a software interface, not in the software that we work on here at ServiceNow.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Bytes. I'm Bobby Brill, your host for this episode, but more importantly, that is Carol Valdez, Director of Content Design here at ServiceNow, who is going to give us a look into the world of writing for UX, writing for interfaces, and a look into this new way of writing with AI. And Carol, it seems that writing has become more specialized and that these AI tools are really changing the way we write. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, you have to really be more than a writer, like a good communicator. What is it that you really want to say, right? You can fill a screen or the air with words, but are they the right words, right? You know, we've been in the business of teaching machines to speak for a long time, right? And now it has a bit more of its own power, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that it can say the right words or know what you're driving towards. So having that human in the loop who really has that judgment around like, what's the need we're trying to meet and are we meeting it with these words here? So it's always been a puzzle, but now you have another variable in the puzzle. So you have almost like a partner, but a partner that needs your wisdom. It needs your human judgment.
A really smart apprentice.
Super eager, right? Eager. And maybe it doesn't have as much ego as maybe a human partner would. And you can kind of push a little bit more than you would with a human apprentice. So in some ways, it's kind of a fun partner because it removes that sensitivity maybe that you might have with a creative partner. But, you know, certainly both are needed in the world that we live in.
Before we get into the weeds, tell us about your team and where they fit into the creation process here at ServiceNow.
Yeah, so I lead content design at ServiceNow within the experience organization. In product design, there are some sub-disciplines. So you have a standard product designer who typically handles the interactions. And then you have visual designers who think about the aesthetics and the visual layout. And then you have content designers who handle the words within the UI. Currently, we're about 15 people on the team, and we engage with our product partners to create experiences that are highly usable. And the words are the part that we're responsible for and really meeting the information needs of users as they make their way through our products.
So this is not technical writing.
Correct. We're at the point of need when they're engaging with that product and they need a little nudge or a cue or something to help them move along. So if they have a top of mind question that's going to keep them from moving along, we try to anticipate that and fill that need with some text that gives them that confidence.
Kind of akin to outside in the real world, out of our computers. This is like wayfinding almost, correct?
Yeah. It is. It's definitely, I often drive around the freeways here in Southern California and think the best UI writing is on the street signs, right? Because it has to do things at scale and it has to show people where to go. So it definitely is finding your way, helping people find their way.
And that's got to be a challenge when you're writing with one word, 2 words.
Oh my gosh.
5 at the most is probably, a novel at this point for your side of writing.
Totally. And everybody has opinions about words, right? Because they, we all know how to read and write. So we always say that we spend 80% of our time investigating the right words and 20% of the time actually writing them. To get down to just a couple words or a handful of words, there's a lot of pressure on those words. So you can't just whimsically say, I think it should say this. You have to go back to those needs we're trying to meet. What is it that a user really needs to know? And what is going to be crystal clear to the most people? So we're trying to accommodate particularly those new users to reduce that complexity. And we've all looked at a screen and gone, I don't know what to do here, right? And you shut down, your confidence goes and you might just leave, right? And that's never how we want anyone to feel. We want them to feel like, oh, there's help here, there's guidance, and we're going to help you through it.
You made a really interesting point, and I think it's very pertinent to the ServiceNow aspect of how the ServiceNow product is working is it's a lot of new users. It's a lot of non-IT workers and a lot of not people with no IT background, this low code, no code. You don't understand what those words necessarily mean if you don't have the background. How do you determine these words to get users to follow the actions you want them to take?
So we want to try to get as close as possible to the language they use. As we make those decisions, it really requires a lot of listening. So we're always looking to identify some listening posts on how people are talking about the subject matter, the task at hand. It's pretty revealing to what you think is clear for everyone. And then you realize putting it in front of users, getting people's reactions, even before you get to that screen level, there's a lot of outside the interface work. You're reading, testing, you're exploring, and then you come up with, your short list of what you think is useful. And then you try to get that into the screens and put that in front of actual users, which is really, that takes the subjectivity out of it, right? Like you have these folks who are telling you, and I've had multiple times where I've had a PM or a partner say, oh, this is what it should say, and this is what it should say. And so rather than argue with them, I'm open to saying, yes, let's test that. Even
Sure.
though I might have a strong opinion or something, you put it out there and the winner reveals itself right there. So,
I think in movies, and we all do, and especially if you're a writer, you're always trying to pull those great quotes. It's kind of like, do you say the lights are on or do you say illuminate?
yeah. And we always say clarity over cleverness. You want to flex your skills, your verbal skills, and there's places to do that. It's usually not to do it in a software interface, not in the software that we work on here at ServiceNow. We try to stay solution focused, and they're starting from here. We don't want to get in the way of getting to that point. We believe that everyone understands that word illuminate, but it's not true, right? There are people who it might give them pause and give that break in their flow. If you didn't notice the words on the screen,
Oh, wow.
then you did a great job. It seems like it was a seamless transaction, right? You just took your steps and you sailed right through.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because that's got to be very difficult from a writing perspective to write invisible. Something as simple as the cancel button has a
Yeah.
lot more weight
Yeah.
and feeling to this than we would think. Explain that.
Yeah. So obviously words can have different meanings, right? And typically cancel is something that's used to say, no, I didn't want to do that. Like I didn't want to do that. But imagine you're in an interface. So you say you want to cancel a meeting. So I get a pop-up modal that says cancel meeting question mark. And typically you'd have two buttons at the bottom and one that would confirm the action and one that would cancel the action. But what happens when canceling is the action that you're wanting to confirm?
Sure.
So you can't say cancel and cancel, right? So you're breaking your pattern there. So then you would say, yes, cancel meeting, and then close, right? So you have to use a variation on it. So there's these little puzzles that sometimes can give designers or people like, oh no, what is that word? What is that one word that's the right word here? That happens in more places than you can imagine. And you're always like, ooh, when I get a new one, I'm always like, wow, that's a tricky one. You might have to have the team swarm on it to say, I don't know, I can't figure this one out. So you throw it off to another perspective.
And that makes a lot of sense when you point it out that way. But it seems like there's a lot of effort going into this for something so simple. How does that translate into the flow of the product?
If you've ever been through a clunky experience, you know that you're not quite sure. So there's something blocking you because the time wasn't taken to figure out confusion, what might be confusing, or open questions that weren't answered.
There has to be a tone to this, right? There has to be a way of speaking to the person you're
Yeah.
guiding, correct? How does that work?
We want to follow our brand voice, right? So we're always wanting to come across as ServiceNow, right? That's our personality. We are ServiceNow. So in our products, probably the more serious side of your personality, you're, down to business, right? You're trying to get stuff done. So you're going to focus on that part of our brand personality and make it feel like ServiceNow, but when we're a trusted partner. So the trust is super important here, because if you're just hanging out and chit-chatting with the company, not so much pressure on it. When you're trying to do your job, to be that partner, you need to be trusted. So we definitely are looking for those things that are getting folks to believe that it's all going to turn out okay. It adds to a layer of complexity to the words that we're choosing, because the words matter, right? Every word will will be reflective of our personality, but also communicative for what's happening. And we definitely don't want to go into that, like what we call an uncanny valley, where we're trying to be too chummy and too like a human. Like I said, if we were that invisible helper, that would be the best thing.
Right.
So
That
those
goes
are
back to that trust idea that you had mentioned. That I as you're saying it, I can think, and I think everybody else can think of an instance like the tone changes. Like, wait a minute. Did the expert leave the room? Did they take a break? What just happened? Now I'm totally lost and confused. Now let's shift gears, because now how does that work when you've got to sit down and write and think about how the customer feels? Walk us briefly through that, how that works.
Ideally, we'd be co-designing, right? The idea of the co-design is that your partners might have ideas on the words, and we might have ideas on the interactions, on how we get through it. So that conjoined brain is a benefit there, because we don't own the words, and we're looking for the right words. So it's a collaborative thing. And then you might need a mild to wild exploration. Like, what if we tried it like this? I've sat with designers and played around with some treatments, and they had like an aha moment and said, wow, you do the same thing with words that I do with a visual treatment. So, this idea that it's just one and done, it comes out. No, it's an ongoing thing. Luckily, we do have a lot of established patterns. Not every problem we're solving is a novel one. We've identified a lot of ways to handle these. We've created a style guide that has all of it codified and what we know at the moment. So in showing examples.
And that, of course, sets up the big asterisk in the room that we're all excited about and utilizing. So how does AI come into this role?
So using AI tools to help with that is glorious, right? It really does allow us to scale our contribution in a way that has always been a challenge for our particular design discipline. There's very few of us. And as I mentioned, there's words on every screen, and even the tiniest of words take a lot of brain power. So now you've got a synthetic brain on your side to help you not only do those mild to wild explorations, but also feel more confident that our guidance is being followed and that we're creating a more consistent experience. It also allows us to move a bit faster. It's not even the writing part of it. It's more of the scoping of those information needs, where it's going broad. It can go broader than even our collective brains can go at speed, right? You can also compile all those research studies that have been done in a particular area. If there are any papers, industry papers, you can create a little knowledge graph of all that, a little corpus, we call it, of knowledge that's going to add to the model and have even more context, more ServiceNow context. It's our intellectual property, and we don't want to put that out into a broader model. So now we have an ability to say, ooh, let's synthesize all this and see how it applies to what we're trying to solve for. So it just gives us a way bigger brain. So our writing has become, it's about like producing writing. We're kind of showing our math, like showing the math behind our process and codifying it in a prompt to say, okay, let's feed this into the AI and see what comes out of it.
For new writers, is there a couple of takeaways that you think will benefit them based off of your experience?
Well, terminology is a huge one, that we have particular words within lots of different industries. We can take these terms and explore them deeper and more quickly. So again, it's that speed of exploration. This again allows you to go, how could I say that more simply? How could I say that more simply? And you can have that partner as the AI, a creative partner that's going to help you go in different directions. So you can take all those requirements, you can take all that research, you can feed it into the machine and then allow it to produce words that then you still are ultimately the owner of, right? It's a great time to be a UX writer, to be a content designer, because it frees you up to do all the parts of the process that you really like.
So there you have it, a peek into the collaborative nature of content creation and the valuable role that AI plays in scaling and enhancing the content design process. And of course, for even more answers on working with the ServiceNow platform, head over to our YouTube channel to learn more. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. I'm Bobby Brill. Thanks for listening.